Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening. You can say it back. Thank you. Thank you. I thought I would start on time, so maybe we could try to get out of here on time and we can get back to dinner and our lives and all of those things. My name is Carolyn Middleton. If I haven't met you yet, you've probably received multiple emails from me over the course of the time that you've been part of the upper school. I'm the director of college counseling, and I'm currently in my 9th year at Berkeley Carroll. I want to introduce my colleagues. I'm going to start with, well, if you haven't already met them tonight, you will. I have two full-time associate directors of college counseling, Mr. Louis Almonte and Ms. Joelle Chen. And I can't say enough to praise these two, truly, for the expertise that they bring to our team and also for their student-centered practice. As we talk through things in our office, we're always thinking about, well, what will the student experience be? What do students need to know? What do families need to know as well? But we always try and center what we're doing on our students. But I also want to introduce to you Ms. Dunn, who was just about to sneak out there. I saw that, Mary. Most of you probably do know Mary Dunn because she's been here since, if you had kids in the lower school, she's been here since that time. And Mary runs our office. She's our college operations manager. So if you've got questions that you just need a quick answer to, Mary's usually the go-to for everyone at school as well. She's usually the go-to for everything. With all of these folks, we have a great team where we all bring different kinds of expertise to the table in counseling our students. And I'd say the thing that I like the most is even I mean, I've been doing this for more than 30 years, and my colleagues teach me things. We change things up because they need to be changed up. We don't ever want to be stagnant and try and do the same things all over again if it doesn't make sense to do so. But I also rely on them when I'm looking at my seniors and their college lists and making sure they're balanced. We've actually, Louis and Joelle and I have been spending quite a few hours in my office looking over senior college lists to make sure that they are balanced. So collectively, I really think that we are that hive mind that people talk about, to make sure that those lists are going to be solid and that students are going to have lots of good choices. So tonight we are going to talk about college. I know the process can feel like a maze sometimes. This is one of my favorite cartoons from the New Yorker. But ideally, it's about making and having choices, right? That's our plan, is making sure that students have great choices, that we apply all the knowledge we have about the institutions that you're exploring, and that we apply all the strategy that we know, and in an ever-changing world, hopefully make sense of it all with you. We try and do things here at Berkeley Carroll with college counseling. We try and do things developmentally. So for some of you, I know you've been waiting for this night since 9th grade. There might be others in the room who are not really even sure that they're here yet. And this feels like it's too soon to start any of this. What's nice is we have a good long stretch of time to get to know one another, a long stretch of time to be able to get to know some colleges, to be able to learn about the process overall. And you've got some pretty good guides to help you along the way. So we're going to tell you a little bit about how this is going to unfold over the course of the year. For most students, applying to college represents the first chance that they get to make a big decision. We know for some families, the student might be the first in their family to go to college. For others, you've been following the footsteps of brothers and sisters and uncles and so forth, family members who have gone through this process before. Still, even if you had a student go through this process only a few years ago, it's likely that things might be a little bit different, especially if you've got a different student that you're working with. Chances are you'll be visiting different schools, learning about different kinds of opportunities. So I hope that you're looking at this process as something that can be quite fun. We do it every year. We think it's pretty fun. And we come to this very hopeful and very optimistic. We always want to make sure that we're with you in the process, but that we try and figure out the positive points. In many ways, the college application process can be a big rite of passage, which is good and bad. because it's one that happens in very public ways. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, kind of how that part rolls out before we get into some of the logistical details. As you near the end of high school, many people will offer advice. Your college counselor, hopefully, is going to give you advice, but parents, siblings, your dean, your advisor, your friends, your dentist. I just came back from visiting my dentist again today. I was sitting in the chair for another 2 hours on top of my 2.5 hours that I spent last week. And don't you know, they ask me questions too. Sometimes it's about college. I was like, yeah, I'm doing a presentation in a couple of hours. Please make sure that crown still sticks into my teeth there. But I mean, people will offer strong opinions, sometimes ill-informed, sometimes good opinions about where they might see you and where you should go. You'll probably have more conversations about college over the next year and a half than you ever wanted to have. Sometimes it's great Aunt Shirley, even your friends, and they've got these ideas of what you should do. So what you'll learn to do is you'll learn to sift through that advice. You'll learn to figure out what's relevant. You'll politely discard what might not be relevant for you. And you'll become very good at research, at learning to navigate college websites, at being discerning about what makes one college different from another, one a better fit from another. And it's also okay to keep your cards somewhat close to the vest. I usually say this in the senior year as well as the junior year. We handed folders out to the seniors the very first day of school, and their transcripts were in there. And don't you know, they want to pull out the transcript and show it to everybody, show it to each other. There's just no reason to do that. It's not about having secrets from your friends or your peers. It is about information that is yours and that you can keep close if you choose to. So we think it is okay to do that. Not with your college counselor, though. We want you to be very straightforward, but no reason to discuss grades or testing with everyone so that college doesn't become the dominating conversation. And that's the real reason why, because the moment you start down that path, college is everything that you end up talking about. And this is, just like our students don't thrive in an environment where there's a constant comparison of grades. I think people come to Berkeley Carroll because it's not competitive like that, or at least that's what students tell me. But comparing college lists also increases tensions. So I think that's an important thing to tuck away and keep in mind. I wanted to say a few words about this at the start of our talk because I feel like it's really important for students to find outlets for their fears and their concerns and their excitement. All of those things are really important. It's easy also to feel judged or like the process is happening to you. And I want students to feel the ownership over the control over the process being theirs, and that it isn't just happening to you, you're making it happen. It's also relatively easy with support to take the reins. And I say with support, sometimes those first college visits or the first conversations you're happening, you'll look to mom or dad or guardian or the person that is there to help guide you. I had the same situation happen. I went with my brother when they went visiting colleges. He's out of college now, but the first couple of schools that they visited, I went with my brother and my sister-in-law and my nephew. And of course, they had made my sister-in-law and my brother had made all the appointments for the visits, which made sense. They were driving there. They were trying to get all the logistics down. But my brother right away was going to walk up to the front and announce himself. And I said, why don't you let Connor do that? Why don't you let him get up there and do it? And he was a little nervous to do it, initially. You all would not be. I've met you juniors. You're not like that. But sometimes the first time doing something can feel a little off. Like, am I doing it the right way? When you go to these information sessions and the admission officer asks you to introduce yourself and who's there with you and what's your major. Oh my gosh, I get that question about major. What do I do? How do I answer that question? Getting used to that, though, is going to allow you to take a little bit more ownership over it. So what's a good way to respond when someone wants to engage in the college conversations? It's really up to you, but it could be, why, great Aunt Shirley, I have a few ideas where I'd like to go, but tell me about your college experience and cousin Jackie's. How did you know college was a good fit? And sometimes you get really good pieces of advice without feeling that pressure to reveal everything. And we'll feed you some of these tidbits along the way. Sometimes taking the pressure off your own search, though, can help you find some unexpected and even relevant pieces of advice overall. So parents and guardians, I would encourage you to help your junior in this way. Try not to make college the central topic of conversation, of every conversation. I think doing it heightens the anxiety level, but you can set specific times. I've had families who have said, we're going to have this conversation 2 days a week, or it's going to be the first 15 minutes of dinner. I do want you to share, students, I do want you to share with your families. I've definitely had some calls this year where parents are like, they're not telling me anything. What did they tell you? And so sometimes we get to triangulate that communication, and that's okay too. We just want to make sure that things are going to be all good at home and that you're feeling like you're having good communication instead of communication about the same thing over and over again. And a word about timing. I think it's easy to feel like you're behind. I was hearing that from some folks sending me emails. You're not. It's almost a full year because before the process really unfolds. And applications are submitted next fall. We want to make sure you have the timeline for what lies ahead, but there is a lot of time. You'll make use of your summer. If you remember nothing that any of us say today, making use of your summer is going to be an important guide to make sure that you get started on the actual application over the summer so that when you return in the fall, we jump in and we're ready to go. And I promise you that a year from now, you're actually going to be near experts in the schools that you're considering, and you'll know much more about the process. We have a structure in place to help shepherd you through the search and the discovery and the application and the strategy and the decision making. But all of that has to come developmentally. You have to learn it a bit at a time overall. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the factors that go into the application review before we start into some of the logistics again. Some of these factors you have control over, some you don't have as much control over. In terms of the application, you run primarily on your academic record, and there's definitely some examples where that isn't always the case, but primarily colleges will have students that they enroll from around the world who have taken a rigorous curriculum defined in the context of that school and defined by that student's record. But all across the country and all around the world, like I said, each of the schools likely grades a little bit differently. We all have different kinds of curriculum. You wouldn't believe the different kinds of transcripts that we've all seen since we've all read applications for admission. So every school is going to do something a little bit different. But college admission officers are going to look carefully at the academic rigor. They're going to look at the grades that you've earned in the context of what BC offers, end of year grades. I know everybody's receiving their first quarter grades. I think today, did you get them today? End of year grades is what we're talking about, especially from the junior year. All of your courses pretty much are going to be year-long grades. So that first quarter grade that you got, you have the opportunity now to build upon the work that you've done, right? So keep that in mind. So the rest of your transcript, you can't change much of that, but you can change what you can do moving forward for that. It's also part of what they normally consider as part of a holistic review process. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means, but it's a pretty big part. So keep focused on doing well in your classes this year, and keep in mind when you choose classes for next year and when you're earning those first quarter and first semester grades next year, because those will become part of the application as well. So it's also important to look at what might be a little bit different in the process this year. At the start of the pandemic, which feels like it was 15 years ago and yesterday at the same time. But at the start of it, many colleges said, we're not going to require testing any longer because they couldn't have testing centers stay open. So there was no testing required by pretty much any of them. There were a handful that still kept the hope out there. Application numbers increased when more students emboldened to reach higher and go for more reaches. But even today, about 2,000 four-year colleges and universities remain test optional. So a few have gone back to require testing, and there may be a few more that make that decision for next year. But I know many of you are in the process of doing some test preparation, are planning for test preparation. And as soon as we begin our individual meetings, we can go through and talk about whether producing testing is going to be something that will be an advantage for you. You know, we talk about that on a very much on an individual basis. Colleges have more national and global applicant pools generally. I mean, since I applied to college, and maybe some of you had applied to college around the same year that I did, you know, certainly we were looking at much more regional, much more local places. Even the school that I chose, I think it was strange for me to go 5 hours away from home. Why didn't you just go insert name of college here? But it was taking a risk. It was is exciting, and I also didn't visit any colleges. You know, I did all of that sight unseen. There's so many things that have changed since the process was the way it was years ago that are incredible advantages. So we do have increases in applications, but we also have testing optional. We have tons of information that you can learn about these schools. So colleges, the most selective ones anyway in the country, are more selective than they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. But if you look at the average admit rate of those, say, 2,500 colleges and universities across the US, it remains about 65%. So there's some schools that are clamoring for students. There's some schools that are very excited to enroll students, not from their own backyard, but internationally, nationally. And they're not seeing those increases in applications. You will see on your college list schools that you might not be familiar with. So as we put those together, we purposely try and provide you with some schools that are probably going to be a great fit for you, at least at the time that we're getting to know you, and we're going to encourage you to get to know them as well. You also bring colleges to the table. You bring to the table places that you're already considering. The colleges themselves have also changed. I have to say that the college or university you may be familiar with from the 80s is likely a very different place. They do things probably a little bit differently. I think about a place like Northeastern University, for example, which used to have a lot of folks from the Boston area enrolling, and that's where the school, its one campus was located. Now they have 4 degree granting campuses, and they've got university sites really around the world. So things change drastically, even in the matter of 20, 30, 40 years. And then there's also some demographics and institutional priorities that could affect your application. You know, 59.5% of graduating high school students applying to college are female identifying. So sometimes when we're talking with you, we'll talk about an individual school, we'll talk about the breakdown of gender on that campus and how that might be an advantage or a disadvantage. And it's surprising to folks sometimes. Ability to pay can sometimes be a factor in admission decisions when colleges are need aware. And full pay students can sometimes unexpectedly be awarded scholarships. So there's times where we will make sure that we craft a list of colleges to either meet full need or to encourage some scholarships or merit funding that you may not have expected, or that you may not have to fill out a big long application in order to receive. Colleges do have objective criteria, grades, scores, program that they care about, but they also care about who they're admitting to their community. So personal qualities matter. And activities tell them a lot about your commitment to your community. My colleagues and I write letters of recommendation, one for each student. And we touch on those qualities in addition to the teachers writing about you, the teachers who you asked to write about on your behalf. For most liberal arts colleges, you'll hear that psychology, English, history, biology, and economics are the most popular majors. You'll hear that a lot in the information sessions. But we're also going to advise you if we think that some are more competitive, like if a student's applying computer science or AI or engineering, it could be that it's a more competitive program, or business. And then arts and architecture programs usually focus more heavily on portfolios and auditions for the performing arts. So everything is not focused just on grades. I don't want to give that impression. Athletics, legacy status, special talents, these could all heavily influence admission or not at all. It all kind of depends. And then global, geographic, excuse me, socioeconomic, gender diversity, all these things can be factors in creating a campus community that reflects the world in which we live. So it's important to talk about these kinds of realities, since it's going to influence the colleges and universities that we might have you consider or suggest as part of that preliminary college list? So we'll talk more about that college list. We'll talk more about the logistics. But first, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ms. Chen, to tell you a little bit more about what to expect.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you. We all did college admissions for very many years, so we always need some energy from the crowd as well. I know it's late, but thank you for the good evening. So I would like to talk a little bit about what's to come. We chatted with the juniors earlier this afternoon or this morning, and we were telling them, you have been doing the work to get to this point. You are not behind, but today kind of acts as a kickoff in the college admissions process. So we want to talk a little bit about what this winter and spring is going to look like. So I know the juniors have been asking each other and kind of quietly asking us, when are we going to hear who our college counselor is? So in late November, you are going to get assigned one of us to work with you. All three of us are great, I will say that. And we all know what we are doing. We work with each other. We work in all different categories. So we've all worked with students who are applying internationally, with athletes, with artists, with students who are looking in public schools, private schools, considering financial aid, but we take a lot of factors into consideration when assigning a counselor. Students will hear about that assignment again late November. After that, they will also be assigned, or before that, excuse me, they will be assigned a survey to fill out. And this is going to be qualities that will make a college right for you. We talked a lot with juniors today to start the process of reflection. College requires a lot of getting to know yourself, getting to know who you are now, and who you also want to envision yourself to become. So we're going to have you all fill out surveys, and we're going to have your parents or guardians fill out surveys. So these surveys will be through what we use to manage application materials. It's a great data and research system, and it's called SCORE. So all students and their parents or guardians will get invites to sign up and create a SCORE account. You're going to become very, very familiar with it. It might become your best friend with the next year, and you're going to use that to fill out those surveys. This is not a speed race. Take your time to fill out those surveys because those surveys are also helpful for us. We're going to talk about it later, writing letters of recommendation, but it's really helpful information to get to know you before we first meet you. Speaking of meeting, we're going to have our first meetings together. So after you're assigned a counselor, we will have a first meeting with the students, and that's just going to be one-on-one with the counselor and the student to get to know them a little bit more, what they're looking for, and that's usually going to happen in December and January. Now, I know we have a couple of students who might be doing a spring semester abroad program. We will try to prioritize your meetings early, so no need to worry about that. After we have the one-on-one meeting and a parent or guardian, both if there are two parents or at least one, needs to fill out that SCORE survey, then we will have a family meeting. The family meeting will include the parents, guardians, the student, and the college counselor. At that meeting, we will share a preliminary list of colleges. So we will put together a college list, and my colleague, Mr. Almonte, will talk about how that's put together. But that's really going to start the research process. It's a really great place to begin to look through colleges that we think, based off of survey and convos, is a great match for you. This is not the last time you will meet with us, but these are just the first steps. After that, we will meet pretty frequently, at least one more time in the spring, especially after spring break, when hopefully you might have been able to visit a couple of colleges. But we will be available to meet as frequently as necessary to help support you in the spring, the summer, and the fall. We're also going to have you juniors complete a list of activities. And these are activities that you have done since ninth grade, that you're planning on doing. This is a really important piece of your common application. We'll talk more about the application, but to start thinking now, if you have a resume or if you have a Word document that you could start putting down the things you've been doing, because I guarantee you for the past 3 years, you've probably been busy. So start taking notes and taking stock of all that you've accomplished so far, because we're going to help filter that in and put it together. Also, one of my favorite moments in the spring is the Brooklyn Independent School College Fair. So that's when we had over 100, how many, like almost two. 144 colleges come and visit us last year. And this is a great opportunity to meet some of those colleges that might have been on that preliminary list, meet colleges that aren't on your list, get to know new colleges, and get to meet them in person. And it's usually the person who might be reading your application when you apply in the fall. So it's great face-to-face time, getting to know them, and it's only open to Brooklyn Independent Schools. So it's a small, intimate setting for you to really form that relationship and ask those questions from those admissions counselors. And like I mentioned, we'll prioritize students who might be studying away in the spring. Looking even further ahead to next summer, as Ms. Middleton mentioned, the summer is going to be busy for you and for us. We want to get as much work done as we can over the summer. I promise you, senior you is going to appreciate it, all that you can get done over the summer. So over the summer, here's what we want you to think about: visiting colleges. The spring is a great time to do that. But we also know you're juniors. You have American Study research papers, walking tours. It gets busy in the spring. So utilizing the summer, maybe it's visiting family and friends. And while you're there, you're also going to visit some colleges. So blend it into kind of the vacation time as well. You are going to put together a first draft of your comment application personal statement over the summer. That is 650 words. That is the statement that is going to go to most US colleges. It's an important statement. It is not the only factor in making an admissions decision, of course, but we really want you to take the time to work in producing this piece of writing. And I promise you, the hardest thing is not going to be the actual writing, but putting the ideas to paper. 650 words is not much. I know, because you all are about to write a lot of research papers. You probably already wrote papers longer than 650 words. But these are 650 words for you to talk about your story and who you are. We'll talk more about that later. You are also going to attend an application essay workshop. So we're not just going to tell you go out, write an essay. We're actually going to have almost day-long essay writing workshops that you are required to attend throughout May and June, and even sometimes into July. These are in-person sessions that are really going to work on crafting, drafting process, getting the ideas going, talking about the unique style of the personal essay. So we will be sending out dates for that later in the spring, so keep an eye out. And again, you are required to attend one of them. If you want to come to multiple, why not? Doesn't hurt, but you are required to attend one of those essay writing workshops. You're also going to start completing the common application. So we have put together very intensive guides, screenshots, step by step, to walk you through the common application. And the common application is what's used for most US institutions. There are other applications that we will help you with, but we think it's important to get as much of this data entry piece done. And that's what a lot of the sections 1 through 5 are: data entry. What does your parent do for work if they work? What is their birthday? Did they go to college? Where they went to college? You might not know that immediately. So we want you to make sure that you schedule time to get that done over the summer. It's small things that add up and make it easier for you in the fall when you have a busy schedule. You're going to attend a reboot camp the day before classes start. So you get to come and spend an incredible September morning with all 4 of us and some awesome admissions guests. So folks who work in the admissions field currently and learn about what goes into an application. So that's a really great way to kind of restart the process to start your senior year. You also get to kind of pretend to do our jobs and read some fake applications. So that's also another highlight for me and some of the programming that we have. In early kind of October, you're going to decide if you're going to be applying early decision, early action to schools. I know those terms might not be familiar. I promise we will talk a little bit more about those, but you want to know early if you're going to be applying early. A lot of deadlines have started to move to November. So many of our students, if you have any friends who are seniors or children who are seniors, you know September and October was pretty busy. So the earlier that you know what you want to do in those early rounds, the better. And then you are going to submit a final college list to us by the end of October. That's what Miss Middleton was talking about when we were sitting together around the table in our office with a lot of leftover Halloween candy and going through the college list to decide, okay, is this student going to have options at the end of the process? That's what we want, for students to have an array of choices for them to find and figure out what's going to be their best match. In the summer, we do take some time off, but we are here for a majority of the summer to meet with you. And we really encourage you to utilize that, to meet with us, to talk through your essays, to talk through interviews, to brainstorm essays. You're not satisfied with your college list. You need more schools that have forestry as a program, for example. We meet, we chat, we talk, we hop on Zoom, but utilize that summer because it really will save you time in the fall. So to give a visual, because I'm a visual learner, this is kind of what the timeline is going to look like. So I like to think in the fall, winter, and spring of junior year, that's your research time. That's when you're starting to maybe visit colleges or starting to research colleges, starting to get to know a little bit more about what you are looking for. What are your non-negotiables? What are the things that are going to be a priority for you in a college to make sure you feel seen and welcome? In the summer, you are going to be busy. You're going to rest, but you're going to be busy. You're going to be working on writing. Summer and fall of senior year, that's going to be the writing time. Getting your essays, getting your college supplements done. Maybe it's doing interviews if your college requires that. And then in the spring, that's your deciding time. That's when you all get to decide where it is that you're going for a majority of you. You're comparing schools, you're maybe going to open houses. In the United States, the universal reply date is May 1st, meaning that you will have confirmed your college by May 1st of 2026. That might be early for some of you. Depending on some situations, that might be a little bit later. But for most students, it's going to be May 1st. And one thing I just want to highlight here, as I mentioned, almost 100% of our students applied by November 1st for this class. So this process does come pretty quickly in the fall. So again, I cannot reiterate it even more. Summer is a time to utilize to get as much as you can done. And now I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Almonte.
All right, good evening, everyone. For those of you that I have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Mr. Almonte. And I am going to talk to all of you about starting your search. So as Ms. Chen mentioned, the first step that all of you are going to take before we even sit down and meet with any of you, students are going to fill out 2 college surveys. Those are really important. First and foremost, you're all in a point in your life where you are growing as an adult and starting to make adult decisions, and that takes self-reflection to get to know yourself a little bit better. It's always nice every now and then to check in with yourself and see how things are going, figure out where you've been, where you're at, and where you want to go, right? So first and foremost, it's good for your academic and social development. And then it's also really good when you take time for these surveys and you provide really thorough answers, because then the person that you're working with, a la us, get to know you really, really well. And then this allows us to be better informed about what might be a good college for you to put on your preliminary college list. It helps us advise you more correctly. And then future us will be very, very grateful, because then when you're writing your letter of recommendation, we have all this anecdotal information and all these really thought out reflective answers that we can use and refer back to when we're trying to get your narrative perfect about who you are and what your experience has been like at Berkeley Carroll and in high school. But it really is a great opportunity to start thinking about what it is that you want in your life. What do you enjoy? So parents, today we did an activity with the juniors that was solely focused on this. We cannot emphasize this enough because it really does drive the rest of the process. For you, it drives the process in terms of picking where it is that you want to apply. And then when you sit down to apply to those schools, they're going to be asking you a lot of these similar questions. What drives and inspires you? What and how do you like to learn? What do you dream of doing in your life? Tell us about your community. What's an aspect of your identity that you find meaningful and why? All of these are extremely important, and it takes a high level of self-reflection, but also an ability to articulate that verbally and in writing to be able to have a successful college process. On the flip side of things, parents, it's also super important that you fill out your survey and you're very thorough with that as well too, because then we're capturing information that maybe the student might have missed. And then we have a very big comprehensive view of who your student is, what their experience in high school has been like, and what they're looking forward into the next part of their educational journey. One thing we want you all to think of is, academically, what is the type of environment that you're looking for, but also socially, what's the environment that you're looking for? Because you're going to be spending 4 years there, you're going to live there. This is going to be your community. You're going to spend more time with your classmates, even more so than you do in high school, than you are with your family for 4 years. So you want to make sure that you're picking schools that are a good fit for you and that you're providing us with the information to be able to guide you accordingly. Thinking about basic criteria, we like to say like what is that you absolutely need and what is it that you would like and what is a deal breaker for you is a good way to think of things, especially as you're assessing colleges. And then eventually you will conduct your research. So juniors, we did the first of our 3 seminars today. Our third and final one is to show you how to do thorough college research. So there's lots of times where students sit down and they say, I'm going to apply to Wesleyan. Awesome, why? And then they stare at me blankly. And then I said, I think you do need to do a little bit more research. So want to be able to do enough research that when somebody asks you, why are you applying? Why are you interested? What excites you about the school? That you have answers locked and loaded, ready to go. You're excited. You have all the information and you know exactly what it is that you're talking about. That has shown that you've done enough research and you have made a very well-informed decision of where it is that you want to apply. Eventually, we're going to send this PowerPoint to all of you, but if you want some fun reading that rivals the New York Times bestsellers, you can actually take a look at our college guide. So we actually just updated this, so it will go through 8 chapters of really fun things that you can have an exciting time learning all about. So this is definitely something that we recommend that you take a look at. Sorry. So in terms of the list, so we talked about the college list. The college list is a preliminary college list that we're going to make after we gather all this information and have a conversation with your student. That is going to be broken down into 3 categories. There's reaches, middles, and foundations. So reaches are typically selective institutions or based on your student's academic profile and qualitative profile might be a selective place that's going to be harder to get into. So we're going to provide 10 schools in that category. Middles are basically your academic profile and your qualitative information is right on target for the school. That's a 50-50 shot of admission. It can go either way, but you're right on target with what the school is looking for in terms of admission criteria. We're going to provide 10 of those as well too. Then the final list is foundations. Other places call them safeties. Those are schools that academically and qualitatively you are well above the criteria that they're looking for, and there's a high likelihood of admission for you to be admitted to one of those schools. So that list of 30 is very comprehensive. You do not have to research all 30 in a week, but over the course of the spring semester and the summer, you should be kind of hacking away at that list, taking a look at schools, becoming more informed, figuring out which ones you like, which ones you're definitely going to apply to, which ones you're still considering, which ones you absolutely will not apply to. You are not siloed to only just that list of 30 schools. We encourage you to look at more schools. We could give you a list of 100 if we really wanted to, but we want to make this process manageable. So, but I think the list of 30 is you have a counselor who has made an individualized, personalized list for you that should be extremely helpful and be a guide and an indicator as you start this process, which can be very daunting. If you look at any other schools beyond what's on the list, it's really important to run that past your college counselor because you might be looking at a school that you think is a foundation when it's actually a reach. So in terms of how we craft this list, there's a lot that goes into it. So like I said, it's the parent and the student survey. It's the conversations we have with the parents and the students. It's the student's academic profile, what grades they're getting in their classes. It's the type of classes that they have. Are they taking advanced level courses? Are they in the most demanding curriculum in science? Are they in SRD? Are they in advanced senior scholars? All of that is going to be an indicator of how rigorous your curriculum is and how colleges are going to weigh that. The university's acceptance rate. So basically the way like our philosophy is and kind of something I proactively do, if anything is below a 10% acceptance rate, it's automatically a reach for any student that's applying. If it's even below a 20% acceptance rate, that's usually going to be a reach for any student that's applying. Financial aid, or if you're in that kind of middle ground where you're making a good amount of money, but not enough to be able to afford college outright, you're probably going to need a lot of schools that are going to provide merit. So as Ms. Middleton said earlier, we will put schools on that list that are going to provide high amounts of merit to be able to try to minimize that gap in terms of financing your education. And then preferred major, lots of liberal arts colleges don't really care what your major is when you're applying, but if you're applying to a university or certain schools that are asking you to declare your major or indicate your major on your application, that's also going to weigh into how schools are categorized or how we make your list. It's always exciting. For instance, this year I got to make a college list that was for a student that was interested in majoring in forestry. I had another one that was interested in nutrition. So those are nice because it's like my little daily crossword puzzle. I'm using all my books. I'm making the list. I'm checking it twice. But we're also very well adept when it comes to like biology, humanities, things of that nature. So it's either second nature for us or we do a really, really deep dive into making sure that a list is accurate and correct for a student. So the point of the list and how to utilize the list is made, and this is basically a standard across all high schools that most counselors are providing students with the list to provide them guidance. It's to streamline your process and to make it a less stressful application process. So if we said, hey, apply to college, go, that's hard because there's thousands and thousands of colleges. So these are handpicked for you. In terms of the application process, it does not make sense to just apply to as many schools as possible, because then you're going to burn yourself out or you're going to burn your student out. It does not make sense to apply to all the most selected places in the world because they're selected. And if all of them don't take your student, then there's no options at the end of this process. So the point of the list is to maximize likelihood of admissions and to ensure that there's options at the end of this process. The process can be a very short process that ends in December of senior year, a mid process, which ends in mid-February of senior year, or a long process that ends in May of senior year. But the list is purposeful and we highly recommend that you use it because it's a very helpful tool. The other is that it's a foundation for research that emphasizes balance and higher admission likelihood. So when we're using this information and crafting your list, we're looking at BC data, so past BC applicants that have applied to these schools. We're looking at their academic profiles and anecdotally information that we know from working with all of them. As we're thinking about you as a future applicant, data cannot tell you everything, but sometimes when you're looking at data on a scatter plot or a scattergram, you can very easily see a trend. So we try to use those to help us inform things, knowing that we don't have a crystal ball. It's not an exact science. It's more of an art. But in theory, if you follow our philosophy and you make a balanced list that has some reaches, some middles, and some foundations, and you're happy with every school that you're applying to and the prospect of attending that school, there should be very happy results at the end of this process. And the final thing is the list is an opportunity for you to learn about very popular schools that everybody knows by name, but also lesser known schools that are very high quality institutions. So I think lots of times we have, families or students or parents that are like, well, I've never heard of this school. And then we have to do some educating and say, well, this actually has like one of the best psychology programs in the United States, which is why we're putting it on your students list because they have the profile for the school and they're also interested in psychology. Other times schools that were maybe not as selective have become more moderately or very selective in 2024. So we want you all to keep an open mind when it comes to the schools that are on the list, because like I said, we have handpicked them based on the criteria that you were looking for. And a great list is a list that has a very strong foundation to be able to take more shots with middles or with reaches. So some resources that we want to go through. So there's a variety of different resources. So in terms of the ones that we suggest, and this is not solely what we suggest, but the FISC Guide to Colleges, so if you don't have one already, we are going to provide a copy to every single junior. It is a wonderful guide that boils down every college, mostly every college, to about a 2-page summary where you can just scan it, get some information, and then realize like, hey, do I even like what this school is described as? Do I feel compelled to do more research? Or maybe you read something within the 2 pages and you're like, not my vibe, or something's alarming for you, and you decide I'm gonna reroute, not gonna pursue that. Then there's also the best 389 colleges, the Prince's of You, the colleges that change lives, which are really, really great institutions that are very tailored towards supporting students. Lots of data and results that show that students are very happy with their academic and social experience there. So that's also something I want you to be mindful of, like these US News and World Report lists. They don't necessarily measure like how happy is the student. It's usually like, what's the average SAT score? What's job placement? What's graduation rate? It's not necessarily like, how happy are you being a student here in the classroom and outside of the classroom? So keep an open mind with those as well too. Suggested web resources, so College Board, which you'll all be familiar with, SCORE, which you're all going to get access to. So just to tell you what SCORE is solely for students to do research on. SCORE for us is to send your documents. The way you apply is the Common Application. So they're all separate, but for students, it's just for you to do research and to do it in a very organized and compartmentalized way. Aside from that, there's also College Navigator, fairtest.org, which has to do with testing, financialaid.org, Department of Education. So really great web resources. We also think that some of the best resources are humans. So we have a lot of BC alum or alumni that are at all the institutions that most of you are probably going to be looking at, which we recommend connecting you with. And then you have a very valuable resource in the Berkeley Carroll College Counseling Office, because we have all worked in college admissions, we have all read applications, we have admitted students, denied students, waitlisted students, and we have guided students through this process here at Berkeley Carroll. So I think we're pretty good people that would help you in this process. We also have a really valuable resource page where we have centralized all of this information for you. So we'll share this with all of you after your college meeting. But basically, there's all these helpful links. There's research tips, comprehensive guides. There's links where you can schedule a meeting with all of us. There's the actual application that you'll be using. You can take a peek at that and see a PDF of it. We have specific research sites if you're interested in women's colleges, Campus Pride Index, Hello College for Jewish students, financial aid websites, scholarship links, considerations, especially as like things are shifting politically in our country, thinking about like abortion laws by state, gun laws by state. So we've put this together and it's very, very comprehensive. So we will be sharing this with all of you. We definitely recommend that you take a peek at this. And 9 times out of 10, if you have a question and you're just meandering around the website, you're probably going to find the answer, but you're more than welcome to reach out to us too. Oh, sorry. The menu up here? Oh, here. Oh, and then we have, sorry, we have our suggested recordings and print material, and then we also have all of our events recorded on here too. So you'll probably see this on there too. So yeah, that's just a shameless plug for our website. And then it does a nice little spin. So in terms of research and visits, so just to kind of reiterate, if you have not visited a college or university, you are completely on time. You're not behind. So once you get your preliminary college list, ideally what you should do is preliminary research, looking at the FISC Guide, checking out websites, going on social media, checking out their YouTube page. We also think a really good thing is to like read the school's student published newspaper, right? To see what's happening on campus. And then if you like what you see, you should identify the schools that you want to go and visit. Most families are going to visit a college or a school on President's Weekend. You can probably squeeze 1 or 2 in February. The bulk of the schools that you should be visiting should be over spring break of junior year. That's ideally where you want to like make a dent in your college list of the schools that from your first scan of your preliminary college list, these are the ones that interest you. Right now, I would say since you all don't have a list, if you've already been visiting schools or you plan to visit some schools, it's nice to go and visit them, but keep an open mind for general things. size, location, major, diversity, things of that nature, but you might be looking at a school that might be incredibly difficult for you to get into and you don't even know it yet. In terms of local visits, you know, just within New York's backyard, you can go and look at a technical institute. You can go visit an urban campus like NYU, a women's college like Barnard, a traditional campus in the city like Columbia. But again, it's good to just keep a general idea if you're visiting now. Ideally, what you want to be doing when you're doing these visits is you want to sign up on the college's website for an official information session and campus tour. This is incredibly important, especially if the school tracks demonstrated interest. What that means is there are certain schools that want to see, are you visiting? Are you interacting with us? Have you filled out an inquiry card? Have you talked to us at a college fair? We visited your high school, did you attend the session? And some schools take that into consideration when they're making a decision on your admissions application. So it's always good to just play it safe. If you're doing something virtually in person, register, fill out a card, attend the session, and then have a good time. If you want to take a step beyond, there are certain schools that will allow you to observe a student, you can sit in on a class, you can attend an open house. So an open house is different than an info session and tour because they typically have faculty, student panels, specialized tours. So maybe you'll go and tour the engineering school, you'll do a general campus tour, you'll go tour the business school. So they usually have a more robust option in terms of visits. If you are interested in being recruited, or if you are being recruited, ideally, this is the year where you want to get that traction going. So once you meet with your college counselor, you can let them know you're interested in being recruited or that you have already started the process, and you should also talk to the athletics department. But ideally, you want to also start making contact with the athletic offices. You can do this in one of two ways. If you're performing at a athletic camp and coaches are there and they see you and they want to start that conversation with you, they're going to reach out and contact you. But you can also proactively contact the coaches for the sports that you participate in to also get the ball rolling. And then if they like your stats, if they like the information that they're giving you, they might invite you to a camp or they might ask where you're going to be at next to go and see you. And then it becomes a recruitment process, and that's a little bit more nuanced, but we handle those cases individually, which we'll talk to you and your family one-on-one. If you can't visit in person, it's really hard sometimes in terms of money or timing to just fly across the country to California or even to sometimes Maryland, right? Or DC. Post-COVID, basically every school has some type of virtual option where you can just sign on for an information session and campus tour virtually. That still counts as demonstrated interest. So there should really be no reason why you aren't doing research or you aren't doing anything that's pretty thorough after you do your preliminary research. Some schools also offer the opportunity to interview. Most interviews are going to start being available for all of you the summer before you start senior year. That's when you can start your interviews. Some of them are going to be informative. Some of them are going to be evaluative. Some schools don't interview at all. If you do interview, it's basically an opportunity for you to learn more about the school, for them to learn more about you as an applicant. And then it is something that is included in your admissions decision if it is evaluative. We will help you prepare for those interviews. We will also help you identify which schools offer interviews so that you're keeping track of that and that it's on your radar. And then the final thing we want to say is, like, in terms of research, when you're visiting these places, parents, it's always good to just kind of like let your child react instead of projecting your thoughts and feelings onto them before they react, because you want to see what their general idea is. Because this is a student-led process and we want them to be in the driver's seat and get into the habit of making more adult decisions. So students, I would definitely say, like, take in your surroundings, observe what's happening around the campus, observe. I always think it's a good idea to do the info session, the tour, but then also just sit in the cafeteria or sit on a bench and just watch people for like 20 minutes, right? You will learn so much about a campus just by people watching, which is a really fun pastime in New York City. And then just follow your gut instincts as it relates to the feeling that you're getting on campus. Can you see yourself there? Can you see yourself being friends with the people on campus? Some terminology that we want to introduce to all of you. We won't get too into it, but as you're going through this process, future you will be having to decide if you're going to apply early decision, early action, restrictive early action, or regular decision. So I'm going to talk about each of those briefly. Early decision is you have identified a school, you are absolutely in love with this school. Think of this as like you have found the one and you're ready to propose, and you're getting on your knee and you're saying, take me now. It is a huge deal. So ED is a huge deal because there are some schools that when they admit their class, they're taking 50 to 60% of their class in early decision 1 and early decision 2. So the likelihood of admission increases in early decision because it's less applicant and they're taking more students. And then for a school like that, if they take 50 to 60% of their class in ED, by regular, there's more applicants and less spots, so it gets harder. So that's the benefit of going ED is you're maximizing your options. A lot of times this is really effective with your top choice school or with more selective schools that might be like a reach or a middle. But sometimes your ED school might be your foundation. You have found the one and it's an easier school to get into and you're very happy and content with that. That's also very normal. There's 2 rounds of this. Early decision 1, you apply November 1st or 15th, you find out mid-December. Early decision 2, same exact thing, except you just get a little bit more time. You can apply January 1st or 15th, you find out by mid-February. If you are admitted, it's a binding contract that basically you're saying, if you admit me, I'm going to come and I'm going to cancel the rest of my applications that are active and I will no longer apply anywhere else and I'm going to your school. So it's a big commitment, but there are big results that can happen if you decide to apply early decision 1 or 2. Early action, not so much marriage, you're dating around, you like some people, you're throwing some apps out. If they like you, cool, you'll make that decision later. You'll decide if you want to take it to the next step later. So early action, earlier deadline, like I said, there's no binding agreement, there's no binding commitment. You just showed the school that you prioritized their application. You got it in by a certain date. They're going to get an answer to you earlier than most other people. And then you can decide if you want to go later. Early decisions like 5 bonus points, early actions like 1 or 2 bonus points. Then people try to get jazzy and spicy, and then they created something called single choice early action and restrictive early action. So you see this at Stanford, Harvard, like very selective places or some Ivies. Basically, they're saying you can apply to us early, restrictive. It's not binding, but you can't apply to any other school early decision or early action if it's a private institution. Publics are fine though. So it's kind of like, you're kind of serious about me. You can't date these other people, but these people are fine. So that's the way to think of restrictive early action. It is a benefit, but basically like it's kind of like a tactic that they use to kind of ensure that if they are taking a shot on you, you have not committed anywhere else. And then the final thing is regular decision. That's just a traditional application process that goes into applying by January 1st. You find out by early to mid-March, and then you have to commit by May 1st. So the big thing with this is like you have to be ready if it's early decision to make that commitment because that's the school you're going to go to if they admit you, no ifs, ands, or buts. And then if you have to make sure that financial aid is correct or feasible if you are applying and you're applying for financial aid and applying early decision. So you want to use a net price calculator, you want to talk to financial aid, get an estimate, make sure that it's reasonable. And then if that makes sense, then it makes sense to take the shot, because if you're applying for financial aid, you're not going to see every package or if any other school is giving you merit scholarships because you've locked yourself into one school before any of that information is available. Yeah, so we introduce this now because as you're starting to research schools and go on visits, you kind of want to be on the lookout, like, do I have a top choice and would it make sense if I apply ED? Will it make a huge difference? Will it give me the push that I need? As you're going through this process, knowing that you don't have to finalize that decision until about early October of senior year. And then the final slide that I'm here to talk to all of you about is the wonderful world of testing. So if you have gotten a email about the bespoke SAT or ACT class and one-on-one individual tutoring, that's me. I know I send the most exciting emails. And I use different font colors and I highlight things and make them really pretty for all of you. So just to kind of reiterate testing, which we've talked about multiple times. So ideally at this point, all of you should have committed to either taking the ACT or taking the SAT. It does not make sense to do both because they are jarringly different tests and you would have to prep for 2 different tests, which is going to take a lot of time when you're in your junior year, you're in Amstead, you're doing a lot of things, and then you're balancing your extracurriculars. All of you should have gotten your PSAT results this week, so if you wanted another benchmark indicator of what your score is in terms of the PSAT, you should take a look at that. If you have not picked the test, we definitely recommend that you do so soon, and you can always have a consultation with Compass Education for free, and they'll help you figure out which is the better baseline score and which one makes more sense in terms of timing. The main difference is the sections on the test and the timing is a little different. You want to go with the one that you're doing better on and the timing feels more comfortable. In terms of a prep timeline, I know some of you have already taken your first exam, which is great. The most common timeline that we're going to see are students prepping in the early winter, early spring, to prepare to take the March, April, or May SATs and ACTs. In terms of strategy, you should take it at least twice, because if you take it twice, you have two sets of scores and they can take their highest scores from each sections, smush them together, and then you have a really strong super score. Ideally, all of you should be doing test prep, because you want to try to make your application stronger by getting really strong testing. Or there might be some schools that reinstate testing this year, next year, that we cannot foresee. And if that ends up being a school you're interested in, or it's your top choice, if you don't have testing, you're ineligible to apply because they require it now. So we've been seeing certain schools reinstate testing, mostly Ivies, MIT, some state schools, Georgetown. But some schools are case by case. So you're going to see that some schools are like, we're test optional for 2 more years, while other schools are waiting to give an update of what's happening this year. Typically, that's going to happen at the end of the spring, early summer. So the only time you should not do testing and not apply with testing is if you have verified that next year every single school that you're applying to does not require it. In terms of testing, you should all be doing test prep. So test prep goes the mile. Your baseline score can jump significantly with good test prep strategies, because it's not just learning the academic concepts that are at the test. It's also learning how to read the question, how to use your timing to maximize your score, get through the entire test, and get a really strong score. If you're on financial aid, we are dedicated to assisting with the bespoke SAT or ACT class, 1 round of one-on-one tutoring, up to the percentage of financial aid that you receive. It's basically like a band system that we're happy to assist you all with. So I will be sending another test prep email tomorrow with all this information. If you have any questions about the class or any of the one-on-one tutoring options, you can just contact me. If you have questions about how much financial aid you're going to receive, you can email the student billing email that's going to be in the email tomorrow. And just to kind of reiterate, if you decide not to do testing, we do foresee that still the majority of schools will be test optional next year. Over 2,000 colleges are currently test optional, and we see that trend continuing. We don't see that it's going to be a massive push for everyone to reinstate testing, but the reality is that there's probably going to be a handful of schools, if not a nice amount, that are probably going to reinstate it, because they've gathered enough information post-pandemic to now to understand whether they're going to stick with it or stick with being test optional or reinstate testing. Yep, that's all I have for you.
All right, so thank you all for hanging with us. I know we're a little over time and it's a Monday evening, but we appreciate your patience. So real quickly, starting to wrap up, we wanted to talk about what's in an application. So this in particular is for the common application I mentioned before, which again is primarily used for US institutions. So in that common application is going to be some demographic data, information that I mentioned earlier, your school transcript, that's 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, and your first quarter or first semester of 12th grade. That is the one time colleges are seeing your first quarter or first semester grades. Otherwise, it is your final year performance. We do not have a GPA. There's no GPA on the transcript. It will just be your grades. We also send a school profile. That school profile provides context about Berkeley Carroll. It talks about all of the courses we offer, what's unique about our institution. When I used to read applications, that's kind of the first thing I went to, especially if I wasn't familiar with the school, because it let me know what am I supposed to be looking for and how do I read this transcript. Recommendation letters, Ms. Middleton will talk about that real quick, but for US institutions, there's going to be one from us and maybe a couple from some teachers. Those are helpful to get a sense of who you are in the classroom, as well as big picture trajectories. Test scores, Mr. Almonte already talked about. That's going to be a conversation between you and your college counselor if you're sending test scores. You might send one to one school and then not send it to any of your other schools, and that's okay. It's going to look different for each student. That personal statement that you are all going to work on over the summer, right? Right? Yeah. Supplemental essays. So some schools might require you to write additional essays. That's why we get that personal statement done over the summer. Those personal or those supplemental essays can be 50 characters to 650 words. So complete another essay. They're trying to get a sense of, have you done research on this school? What do you know about this school? How are you going to be a good match to this school? What are you bringing to the school? So every school is going to be different. Some might have none. And you might say, well, I want to apply to the schools that have none. Sure, but you might have to do things like interviews for those schools that have no supplements. So you're still going to have to do some type of work for those institutions to show that you're a match there. Interviews can look informal, like a conversation with a student, or it could be something that happens on campus. Some schools have no interviews. So again, what you're going to start to see with the college process, we like to talk about this with the seniors, it's like apples and oranges. They're very different processes for each student. Activities I'm going to talk about in a second. And last, portfolio or abstract. So if you are an artist, your portfolio, if you're going for dance or acting or music, that might carry more weight in your admissions review process than anything I mentioned before, because they're really looking at talent, they're looking at potential. As I mentioned, this is for the common application. If you're applying to Canadian schools, they probably are just looking at your transcript. If you're applying to UK schools, it's transcript and one letter of recommendation. Every school system outside of the US is going to look a little different, but this is primarily what will comprise of a college application for US institutions. So real quick, activities and involvement. This is a copy of what the common application actually looks like. This is what college admissions officers are right now preparing to read for ED and early action applicants. And we wanted to highlight this in particular for the juniors in the room, to think about the things that you have already been engaged in at Berkeley Carroll. Remember, I mentioned earlier, start to write those things down. And it's going to be things like maybe you're a part of Best Buddies, or maybe you give Key Society tour guides. But it's also things like maybe I spend most of my evenings and afternoons helping to take care of my younger sibling. Maybe I'm very involved in my religious community. Maybe I help out my neighbors, or I help support my grandparents. Those are activities as well. They want to see what you do beyond the classroom, because getting a sense of that tells them a little bit about what you might bring to the diversity of the campus. So starting to think about those things, as well as taking them beyond Berkeley Carroll. So Berkeley Carroll is a great place to start finding those passions. We have a summer enrichment guide and a school year enrichment guide. You might have already received it. We're going to send out another update soon, I promise. That's a great place to look to take those passions you've discovered at Berkeley Carroll and apply them elsewhere. So now I'm going to bring up Ms. Middleton to wrap us up.
And recommendation letters. There's actually 2 slides between us and dinner. Recommendation letters. We actually have students ask for recommendations in the spring of this year. So there's a whole process where we will send out a note to all of the faculty, and we'll let them know juniors are going to be asking. We let them know the parameters of what colleges expect, what they ask for, kind of an amalgamation of the rules that they publish. And those teachers then will have the summer to write, and they have all the way until, I think the deadline this year was October 17th. So teachers actually give us the letters all at the same time, earlier than that November 1 deadline. We do that purposefully so that you have the time to be able to decide whether you're going to apply early somewhere, whether you're going to wait for a regular decision, whatever timeline it is, we want to be ready to send those letters. Now, the rules, the parameters that colleges typically give us, they typically want us to have letters from 2 teachers. Sometimes they just say 1, but we often will send 2 anyway, but 2 teachers who've taught you in 11th or 12th grade in different subjects. And subject-wise, what they're typically talking about is math, science, English, history, and foreign language. So picking two teachers that know you well. It could be a teacher that had you in 10th grade, and then you had them again in 11th grade. It could be a teacher that you haven't had since 9th grade, but you know for sure that they will have you in 12th grade and you've kept close contact with them. What their job is to write about you in the classroom. That's something that my colleagues and we have the ability to pull your anecdotals. We can fill in where you might not have had the opportunity to ask particular teachers. We can fill in and we quote teachers to reinforce our explanations of your academic prowess. But those teachers really get to know you in that classroom experience. They get to know how you've grown, how you might conduct yourself in a seminar kind of a setup where you're engaging your peers with ideas. You might be the one that goes to the board each time and does your problem sets in front of everyone and explains that. All the different ways that you are a student. That's what teachers are focusing on. So on the slide here, you see all these things on the left-hand side. A lot of recommendation letters will list all of these things as areas that they expect teachers to do check boxes for. We don't do check boxes. We have quality letters. I can tell you right now, having read applications, either on the high school side or on the college side for more than 30 years, our teachers know you really, really well. Our teachers also care about what they're writing. They'll often come to us and say, I'm stuck on this moment. Have I gone too far? Have I gone, am I too overly supportive of this student? I'm not sure what to write about this particular area, but they have their instincts are right. They know what to say. You've read their anecdotals, so you have the opportunity to preview some of what they might be saying. I know anecdotals typically sandwich a little bit of the good with the bad. It's mostly the good that you see and then growth. So rather than thinking about something as a positive or a negative, if there's strengths, they're going to really talk about those. And if there are areas that are weaknesses in comparison, what they're going to talk about is how you've grown. So teachers know what to write. We've done some great training with them. We provide materials for them as well. The reason why colleges typically will say 11th or 12th grade, it's the more mature you. You tend to be taking more advanced courses at that point in time. So that's really what they want to focus on. We say academic subjects only. So when folks are talking or are thinking about which teachers to ask, we typically will point out that most colleges are asking for academic letters of recommendation, math, science, English, history, language. But you also know folks that are in the arts who know you really well. And especially if your plan is to major in the arts, they will have a requirement from an arts teacher. So we do occasionally have students that might have a third. We might have a student that says, but I want to major in computer science. We'll talk it through individually with you and make sure that that selection of teachers that you're choosing, and we'll help you prepare for the ask. We'll make sure that you know what it is you're going to be asking them and how. But those teachers are really going to be able to write things that in many cases we cannot write. The counselor letters, when I think about the difference between the two, I always think about the counselor letter of being more of the floodlight view. It's the overarching view of you at Berkeley Carroll, your life outside of Berkeley Carroll. All the information that we get for that letter comes from you. So it might come from those surveys. It also comes from interviews that we do with every single student to make sure that we're touching base on the right points that we want to be able to describe in that letter of recommendation. It also gives us the opportunity to narrate a little bit of your academic experience. So if you've had a blip in your grades or you jumped a level in mathematics, we want to be able to point that out. We want to be able to highlight that in our letters for the folks who are reading it to make reading as easy as possible. And finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about financial aid. Some of you may have heard about College Money Method. College Money Method is an organization that we've partnered with, and they do 6 different sessions for us and a number of the other high schools that we work with in joint programming. So there's 4 schools that have partnered with College Money Method in the Brooklyn area. They will do programming for 9th grade families, 10th grade families. There's 2 programs specifically for 11th grade families and 2 programs that they do specifically for 12th grade families. So the dates are on your calendar that you have. They're also up here. Paul Martin, who runs College Money Method, is extremely knowledgeable. Really knew everything about the free application for federal student aid updates when they made some big changes a couple of years ago, or last year, I guess it was, and knew everything inside and out. So he's extremely knowledgeable. He'll even meet with families one-on-one, but these sessions are relatively small. He does them all virtually, and they are opportunities for you to be able to learn a little bit, also ask questions. I think Lewis had mentioned the net price calculator when he was talking about choosing colleges. The net price calculator, back in, I think it was 2011, colleges were required to put a net price calculator on their website. It enables you to plug in your financial information anonymously and calculate what the college's financial aid package might look like. I often say, once you have a shorter list, take that a step further. Call the financial aid office. Ask about things that you weren't able to put into that form because it's considerably shorter than the actual financial aid forms. But it's a great way to be able to get a sense of what your costs for college might be. The two forms that you see up there, the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, and the CSS profile. FAFSA is for all schools. CSS profile is typically for just private universities, though there's a few public universities that are requiring it. And timelines fit the same timelines that you're looking at for admission deadlines. So kind of keep that in mind as well. And in our conversations with you, we're happy to talk about merit scholarship opportunities. If you're in that situation where you don't think you'll qualify for aid, but it might be helpful to have $5,000, $10,000, we can point you toward places that might give scholarships to 98% of their applicant pool. It tends to be the case where if selectivity goes down a bit, there's more of an opportunity for that kind of merit scholarship opportunity. And then, of course, on that Google site that we showed you, there's a big long list of different links to scholarship search organizations. So that's what's listed at the bottom there. FastWeb, Going Merry, Thurgood Marshall, and UNCF have some great scholarships for historically Black colleges and universities as well. So that's a little bit about financial aid. Now, we know some of you have to go, but we wanted to offer the opportunity, if you had questions, I think we're pretty thorough, so you might not. But if you had questions, I'm going to ask my colleagues to come up here and see if we can answer them. But if you need to go, we completely understand. Thank you so much for coming tonight. That's the end of the show. And certainly we can take individual questions if you don't want to answer them in the group, or you don't want to ask them in the group. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for coming. Just turn this on. Yeah.